All right. Good evening, everybody. I am Dylan Neighbor Cruz, the tattooed theologian, and that is most definitely not December Rose, but it is God Squad Pod founding member Keith Giles. And I'm grateful to Keith for pinch hitting for December while she's at a conference this week. Keith, welcome back, sir.
Oh, Dylan, so glad to be back in the God Squad Pod chair. Sad that December isn't with us, but wishing her the best as she's traveling and hope she has a great time at a conference. Yeah, this is going to be good. It's good to be back. Good to be back with you and all of our God Squad podcast listeners live here on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and everywhere else. So yeah, good to be back.
Yeah, well, I don't know about you, but I am sick to death about being right about this fascist kakistocracy regime that we've got in Washington, D.C. with Mango Mussolini and Pee Wee German and Cosplay Christie and, Jägermeister Hegseth and all of those clowns.
I love those names. That's perfect.
Yeah, I can't take credit for any of them. I wish I could. But yeah, oh my God, just this week, more fascist nonsense, doubling down, and a lot of it is at the behest of Stephen Miller, who is, I don't want to say that a person can be irredeemable, but he is pushing the envelope of being an irredeemable human being at this point.
He's the closest thing to like a Dark Lord of the Sith that I think in the real world that I could imagine. Like when I just look at him when he's talking, I don't know, you get kind of like slithery, dark, vibes from this guy. Like, ugh. I don't know.
Yeah. There's something profoundly off about that man. I mean, I've seen videos of him in high school just losing his mind.
Yes.
About immigrants screaming at a school assembly. And then there's going around lately where he talks about, why should I have to pick up my trash? We have plenty of janitors to do that stuff. That's the kind of stuff a sociopath says.
Yes, I saw that clip. I saw that clip as well. And I thought, well, there you go. That's where it all began.
Yeah.
Let's give this guy, let's give this guy some power and put him in positions of government in the White House. What could go wrong? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he was the architect of a lot of the family separation stuff in Trump version 1.0. And recently he started screaming at ICE officials and Department of Homeland Security officials because they weren't rounding up enough brown people to suit his taste. And he wants 3,000 people a week now to be detained. And they clearly don't care what their status is.
No, they don't.
And they clearly don't care about the rule of law and all of those kinds of things, because they arrested a union leader last week who happened to be on the sidewalk and they pushed him over. I mean, they full on arrested the guy, and he's a well-known person in Los Angeles because he's the president of the Service Employees and International Union in LA.
Yeah.
Direct action gets the goods, a union one for union for all. Let's go. I used to be a wobbly a long time ago. But what happened today was so shocking. I spent the afternoon at the seminary library preparing for my segment, and then I came home and I saw something online that Jasmine Crockett said about Senator Padilla, and I was like, what's that all about? And then I looked it up, and oh my God.
Yeah.
So
I know what you're talking about.
In case anybody hasn't seen it, this is California sitting senator. He is actively in the Senate. He's not a retired senator.
No.
He is an active Democratic senator from Los Angeles. And he was trying to get answers, as he is allowed to do, from Kristi Noem, who was given a press conference. So I'm going to bring this video up.
The matter is a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your I also want to talk about specifically how many of our ICE agents have been docked.
On the ground. On the ground. Hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
If you let my hands go, and put them behind my back.
All right. Cool. One hand. Lay flat. Lay flat.
Other hand, sir. Other hand.
There's no recording loud out here.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
my video editing skills are not brilliant. Right before all of that happened, he said, "I am Senator Alex Padilla."
Yes,
He said
you see
it
the whole
very
clip.
clearly.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
He said it very clearly, but Kristi Noem went on Fox News and told millions of Americans that he didn't identify himself.
right.
And he
Right.
absolutely did. And
He did.
my video skills notwithstanding, it's all over the internet. You can see it. One of his staffers was recording, and then one of the jackbooted thugs said that you're not allowed to record in here, which
Mhm.
is
It was a
no.
press conference.
It
Wasn't
was
it
a
a press
press
conference?
conference. There are
How do you-
cameras everywhere.
Yes, you're not allowed to record in here. It's a press conference. That's insane. Yeah, and again, like it's doubly disturbing because one, like you said, my gosh, when I saw that clip, I was thinking, where's all my states' rights people? Where's all these like,
Right.
I mean, I was a member of the NRA when I was an evangelical, conservative Christian, and we got these newsletters in the mail every month, these little magazines, and it was all about the very reason why you need the right to own an AR-15 or a machine gun or whatever gun you want is because one day, boys and girls, the federal government is going to come and they're going to, federal government's going to overthrow the states' rights, and we need to rise up. We need to be able to stand up against tyranny. Well, here it is, right? Here it is. We saw it happening on camera. The federal government, Homeland Security, silencing someone trying to exercise their free speech, someone who is actually an elected official for the state of California, in the state of California, asking a federal official questions about what they're doing, which is, by the way, questioning the legality of what they're doing, because they have these people that are not, these ICE agents that are not identifying themselves. They're wearing masks, like literally anybody right now. And this has started to happen, right? I don't know if you guys have talked about this or not, but this has actually started to happen because anybody can, you can go on Amazon and order a jacket that says police or ICE. You can, cover your face and ride around in a car with some, handcuffs and just walk up and say, "Hi, I'm ICE," and put a bag over someone's head, zip tie their hands together and drive them away. You don't even
That
have to
happened
be
in
ICE.
Philadelphia. Something similar to that happened.
Yeah.
A guy who wouldn't show ID, had the gear on, and he ended up stealing a bunch of money from people.
Yes.
Who were, clearly black or brown skinned people, probably
Right.
Spanish speaking. But this is the second time already that ICE officials have tried to keep politicians out from seeing or saying or doing their due diligence. And it's LaMonica McIver has been indicted for forcibly impeding and interfering with law enforcement during a confrontation at an ICE detention center in Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah, I remember that. That's right. Yeah.
And now she's been federally indicted.
Oh my gosh.
And Mike Johnson, that sleazy little shit, who, again, I am the new Moses. If you want to know what I believe, just read the Bible. None of the stuff you're doing's in there, man.
Sorry,
none of
buddy.
it's.
Maybe you need to read the Bible again. Yes.
Yeah. He said that Senator Padilla needs to be censured for what he did. He's doing his job.
Yes. Yeah. He wasn't disruptive. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't being obnoxious. He stood up, he identified himself, and he started to ask questions at a press conference, which is what you're supposed to do at a press conference. Yeah. And golly, the idea that they doubled down on it. This is what drives me insane, is that these guys, again, this is the party that my whole life has been going on and on about the Constitution and warning us that the other guys are going to try and they hate the Constitution, and they hate America, and they hate freedom, and they're going to come forward. And that's why we have to do all these, justify all these horrible things that we do. And now, guys, it's them. It's the Republicans. It's the conservatives who are doing all these things. They're the ones sending police to arrest people without due process, right? Without just taking away people's freedom of speech, like right there in public on camera. It's unbelievable. Police shooting people at those LA protests. I've seen video of 2 different people who were shot just standing around. They were doing anything.
One of them was a reporter.
Yes, from Australia. Yes, shot her in the leg.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, those non-lethal rounds are very dangerous.
Yes, it's basically it's still a bullet. It's still a slug. The only difference is it's covered with a coat of rubber.
Yeah.
Right. But the velocity and the intensity and force of that bullet is exactly the same.
Yeah, it just doesn't penetrate the skin,
right?
But it causes a blunt force trauma to the skin. And if you get shot in the face with that thing, or you know anywhere other than that butt, it's going to leave damage. I mean, even if you get shot in the butt,
it can do it. It can break bones. It can break ribs. It can do internal damage. You can lose a finger. I've heard stories of people losing a finger because they're just shooting indiscriminately in the crowd, and something like your finger or your thumb gets hit by a bullet like that, you're going to lose it.
Yeah, it's gone.
Yeah.
Well, Beth Brighton says, March tomorrow. We need a unified front. There are like 1,800 marches scheduled on Saturday.
Yes.
For the No Kings marches.
Yes.
And please, people, we need mass noncompliance. We need mass resistance, and it's got to be nonviolent because
please.
What Trump wants, what Stephen Miller wants, what Pete Hegseth wants is martial law.
Yes.
So if you're out there, stay safe. If you choose not to go, I get it. But do not engage in violence. And I've seen a lot of people saying, if people start getting stupid and violent, sit down immediately.
I saw that.
So that they know who's doing it. Because if you're sitting on your butt, you're not engaging in violence.
You're not inciting violence.
Or vandalism or anything like that.
Yeah, I saw the same thing, and I thought that was such great advice. And I do hope that they communicate this to people, or that people going to these protests will see this and that people will follow it, because it's ingenious, really. It's one of these sort of like creative nonviolent strategies. And what it was saying was, so if you're in a protest and there's violence happening, immediately, number one, be quiet, stop yelling and shouting and chanting, just be quiet, total silence, sit down right where you are, link arms or hold hands with everybody next to you, and just sit there quietly. Because then you're right. What will people see? They'll see that it's only the ICE agents, it's only the police, it's only the military, whoever's there, whoever's inciting the violence. It'll be very obvious who's doing the violence and who they're doing it to. And if the crowd is just sitting there quietly, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. Like, then there's no doubt what's happening here. And I do hope that, first of all, I hope there's no violence. But like you said, this is part of the plan. I mean, this is part of the playbook. In Project 2025, there's a plan for Trump to essentially look for reasons to create, call in this insurrection act to give him, to declare martial law, and it's basically for him to seize power. And we're right on target, by the way. There was also something that Trump did on January the 20th, I think it was. One of his very first executive orders was he commissioned Pete Hegseth for the, Department Secretary of Defense, and also Christine Noem, Department of Homeland Security. And he tasked both of them together to he gave them a deadline of the end of April to do some sort of like assessment as to whether or not he should impose martial law. Now, he did this in January, guys. There was nothing going on in January, right? There's no massive protests in January. So
we didn't have an insurrection because he got reelected.
Right, exactly. And so the fact that he did this back in January and he set a date out to the end of April. Well, here we are, right in the kind of the beginning of June. We're pretty much right in line with the target of what he wanted, right? It's worked out the way he's wanted it. Now they're just waiting for these massive protests, which again, I think are great. Yes, let's do protests. I don't want anyone to stay home unless you know understand. I understand if you're afraid, but if you can go, please go, because we do need these protests to send a message, right? I think they are effective, but we have to keep them nonviolent and don't play into his hand. Don't give him any excuse to say, aha, look, these people were violent. Therefore, now I get to declare martial law and this insurrection act from the 1800s and take power, because that's what he's hoping for. That's what he's hoping
Oh,
will
yeah.
happen.
Well, remember when Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, said that we're going to have a revolution and it'll be nonviolent if the left allows it to be?
Yes.
Now, the Heritage Foundation is the people that put out Project 2025, and Kevin Roberts
Yeah.
is a hard right fascist Catholic who admitted that Donald Trump lied when he said he didn't know about Project 2025.
Right.
And then he made that comment about if the left allows it to be.
Mm-hmm.
My guy,
Mhm.
ICE rolled in and started creating violence out of nothing
That's
in
right.
LA.
That's right.
They're showing up at elementary schools and telling people that they have parental rights to talk to the kids and then taking kids, and they're lying about it.
And that should scare the hell out of you. I don't care who you are. If you're
Yeah.
a Democrat or Republican, listen, guys, come on, wake up. If they can go to your schools, if they could talk to your kids and lie that they have your permission to talk to your kids and then just take them without you knowing what's going on, that should scare the crap out of you. And the thing is that if it doesn't scare you because, well, they're only doing that to brown people, they're only doing that to people of color. Again, it's that whole thing about what happened in Nazi Germany. I said nothing
Mm-hmm.
when they came for them because I wasn't one of them. But listen,
Right.
it's the principle. Once you give a fascist dictator those kinds of powers and you don't say anything and you're complicit, you allow that to go on, you're enabling that. I mean, as if fascism is just going to be conservative. We just want, we're not going to, it's not bad fascism. It's just, kind of
Right.
moderate fascism. There's no moderate fascism. If you give them the inch, they will take the mile. And that's the goal. That's what what Trump wants is absolute and total power, right? He idolizes all these dictators. He loves Putin. He loves Xi. He loves all these guys. North Korea, right? He loves that guy. So
Yeah.
that's what he
Orban.
wants. He wants to. Yeah, exactly. Orban. He wants to be like those guys. So
Well, Senator Padilla, after he was uncuffed and let go today, said words to the effect of, if they're doing this to a United States senator
mm-hmm.
for asking a question in front of cameras,
Yeah.
what do you think they're doing to people like cooks and farm workers
Yeah.
and immigrants that they're targeting?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we know some of what they're doing. They're sending them to fucking El Salvador without due process.
Yes.
That's what they're doing. They're
Yeah.
trying to set up deals to send people to South Sudan.
Yeah, I know.
And if you haven't heard, South Sudan is rife with violence right now.
Yeah, it's sending you into the hornet's nest. It's really terrifying.
They've talked about sending them to Libya. I saw I think today or yesterday, that they're talking about trying to find places in Kosovo to temporarily hold these people.
Yeah.
These are human beings. And as our friend John Fugelsang says a lot of times, call them what they are, Christian refugees.
Yes, they are.
Because most of the people in the global south that are coming through the southern border are Christians of one kind or another.
Yes, that's exactly right. They are. They're Christian refugees. The Christians in America gleefully and gladly arrest without any due process and deport and separate from their children. It's pretty evil. And again, all in the name of Christian nationalism. It's
Right.
really sick.
Yeah. So I saw something on MSNBC today. I cannot remember the guy's name, but he used to be some kind of national security advisor or whatever. And he said, we're only 5 months in.
I know.
We're 5 months into this.
Mm-hmm.
And this is already more than what happens in places like Orban's Hungary.
Yeah. It's pretty
Already.
fast forward. Yeah. It should really scare the
in
crap out
5
of you that
months.
we're only in the 6th month of the year, or the beginning of the 6th month of the year. And we're already at no due process, deporting people without due process to other countries. We have the military, literally the military on the streets in LA, the National Guard and the military, the Marines, as well as in Washington, D.C. for this stupid parade he wants to do. But
I hope it rains 5
it's,
inches.
it's supposed
And
to
that-
rain cats and dogs, and I think that is so hilarious. That shows you God has a sense of humor. I just hope it is the biggest disaster, the biggest, goose egg possible. That it's like, no, sorry, this is just sad and and embarrassing. That's what I hope happens.
Yeah. Well, most of our regular listeners will know that I am a former Marine. And when you go to the MEPS, the Military Entrance Processing Station, you take an oath to the Constitution to swear
Yes.
to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Yeah.
And there are things that are unlawful orders. I was given an unlawful order one time when I was in the Marine Corps. It was not anything near like what's happening here, but it was an unlawful order and I refused to do it. And the person who outranked me then contacted my platoon sergeant. My platoon sergeant's like, hey, what the hell? And I was like, it was an unlawful order. You can court martial me if you want to, but I'm not dumping 50 gallons of waste oil on a fragile ecosystem.
Right.
No. And he goes, oh, that's what he told you to do? I said, yeah. He asked me to take a bunch of waste oil and just dump it on the ground somewhere.
Yeah.
And I said, no.
Good.
So for the Marines in California or National Guardsmen anywhere, your oath is to the Constitution, not your platoon sergeant, not your commanding officer, not President Trump. It's to the Constitution. Conscientiously object.
Yes.
Do what you got to do. Sit down, whatever. But do not use military force against American citizens who are exercising their constitutional rights.
Right. And honestly, Dylan, that's right now a big part, I think, of what we are, that's what we're kind of depending on. Our best hope is that when the order comes, and I think it's a matter of when and not if, it may not happen this weekend. Things may go very well with these protests. Maybe Trump will be distracted by this stupid parade or whatever. It may not happen this weekend, but it will happen at some point. At some point, Trump or Kristi Noem or Pete Hegseth or someone is going to give the order and send in Marines or National Guard or both, and they're going to order fire into the crowd. Again, Trump wanted to do this in his first term, right, during the George Floyd.
Right. He said, "Can't we just shoot them?
Can we just shoot him in the leg? Shoot him in the knee?" So at some point, that order is going to come. I believe it, and our best hope is that the majority of those soldiers will have a conscience and will remember their oath is to the Constitution, to uphold the Constitution, and they'll refuse. Drop your weapon, take off your helmet, walk into the crowd, stand with the people that are protesting, and refuse those orders. And the thing is, I kind of think it's only going to take a handful of them. If 5 or 10 of them started to do it, I think the rest of them would probably say, yeah, this is crazy. They're probably just waiting for somebody else to be the first one to be the one to say, yeah, I can't do this. To be asked to fire on American citizens who are exercising their First Amendment rights. I can't imagine anything more horrific. So I hope it doesn't come to that, but I feel like at some point Trump wants to push it that far. That's what he wants.
Well, and to go back to the absolute necessity of nonviolence for these protests, even if the National Guard's not called up, if it's just ICE, if it's just the FBI, if it's just any federal law enforcement people, you are outgunned. You are not going to win that fight.
No.
And I mean, even if people start showing up with their own weapons, that's a recipe for absolute disaster.
Yes. Please leave your guns at home. This is not.
Do not bring weapons.
Do not bring guns to the protest, please.
Because that's how innocent people get killed.
Yep.
And yeah, agent provocateurs that are federal. That's why I think sitting down is the thing to do, because if they're the only ones standing up
It's
and
obvious.
you can see who they are, then that exposes them.
Yeah,
and that's a tactic that they've used before.
Yes. Oh wow. Okay. And that's I think that would work because again we do know, and one of the persons commented just a minute ago about how we do know that they've done this, right? Police departments have admitted they've done this. FBI admitted they've done these, or got caught doing these things. Or they will have plainclothes officers in the crowd, and kind of the goal is to kind of get to do some violence so that they can show force and arrest them and end it quickly. But yeah, if they all sit down, so if there's Proud Boys, in some of these protests this weekend, right, and other militia people out there that are like and white supremacist and white Christian nationalist groups that want to infiltrate these protests and want to cause and create violence. If when they start doing that, everybody sits down, then it'll be very obvious. Like, hey, even if they're just standing in the crowd next to you, you sit down, they probably won't know what you're doing, or they won't know what's happening. They'll just be looking around. What's going on here? So it's a great way to out them for what they're really there to do and what they're trying to accomplish. So yeah, I'm going to see if I can go out this weekend to one of these protests here in El Paso.
And it's not just big cities. ICE was reported in downtown Lancaster today.
Wow.
So Lancaster's only got 65,000 people in it. And there are a lot of Spanish speakers here. Most of them are Puerto Rican. We have a 25% of the population, I think, is from Puerto Rico here in Lancaster.
Wow.
And for those who might have missed the memo, they're allowed to be here.
Yes.
They are Americans. Puerto Rico, right, wrong, or indifferent, is an American territory, and they have the right to move freely between the continental United States and Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
So, wow, that sure was fun.
That's just catching you up, everybody, on the news of the day. This is where we are today in America.
Yeah. Well, I do have some fundamentalist fuckwittery this week, and this probably won't surprise anybody, but the fundamentalist fuckwittery this week is brought to you by the Southern Baptist Convention.
Yeah.
And the reason that it's brought to you by the Southern Baptist Convention is because they continue to be on the wrong side of history, as they so often have been. There have been about twice when they were on the right side, when they were ardently pro separation of church and state, and when they were okay with abortion back in the 60s. But other than those two things, they've been on the wrong side of history. And the reason that I picked them for this week is because they had the Southern Baptist Annual Convention this week. And that was in Dallas, Texas, about 50 miles from where I grew up and about 500 miles as the crow flies from where Keith is sitting.
That's right. Yes. It's quite a ways
away.
And
the reason this is important is because the Southern Baptist Convention is the largest Protestant denomination in the United States of America. And they have been incredibly politically active now for all of my life, all of my 53 years at least.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, not so much, but with the moral majority movement and all of that. So I want to do just a little bit of a deep dive. I hope everybody will bear with me because I'm going to ramble on like a manic street preacher here for a minute. But this is important stuff because Mike Johnson's a Southern Baptist. And he's the Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
There are lots of Baptists, Southern Baptists, in political life around the country. He's probably the most prominent.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a Christian nationalist. I am grateful to Professor Allison Collis Green for an article that she wrote that I found on an academic journal today. Some of this stuff I knew, some of it was new information for me. But the reason that there is a Southern Baptist Convention at all is because in 1844, at the Triennial Convention, they wanted the Southern enslaving class, who were Baptists, were fighting with the abolitionists from the North, and they tried to nominate an enslaver to a position on the home mission board or a home mission field to send a slave-owning white supremacist out to spread the gospel.
Probably in Africa
And
or something.
And so the Northerners, they weren't cool with that.
Mm-hmm.
And the Southern Baptists decided that they would then split. Now, here's some of the kinds of things that you would hear from Southern Baptist people, or that they would do. So they founded their flagship seminary, Southern Seminary in Kentucky. And they had a gentleman by the name of James P. Boyce, who was the first president of that seminary. He enslaved 23 people who were descended from Africa. Southern Seminary also, I guess they had some financial hard times after the Civil War. And Joseph E. Brown donated money to the seminary to save them from fiscal ruin. And he made all of his money from the brutal convict leasing system in Georgia.
Mm.
Now, for those who are uninitiated, after the Civil War, when rich white people wanted some more free labor, they started creating these random laws, vagrancy laws. And just like today, where you can be standing outside of an elementary school or minding your own damn business and ICE shows up, sheriffs or other law enforcement people would just start rounding black people up off the streets.
Yep.
For violations of these vagrancy laws, put them in prison, and then the prisons would then lease them to industrialists like the ones who built the railroads in the South.
Yeah.
And so they got essentially enslaved labor because the 13th Amendment says that you can be enslaved if you're in prison.
Yes.
So, oy, oy, oy.
Yeah, and I used to be a Southern Baptist, and you know what? No one ever told me that story. You know, that was
No,
never.
me neither.
Yeah, no one ever said that to me. No one said, "Oh, do you know why we're called Southern Baptists?"
I got married in a Southern Baptist church. I got baptized in a Southern Baptist church. And when I asked my wife, who went to a Southern Baptist seminary in Texas, why it was called the Southern Baptist, did that have anything to do with slavery in the Civil War? She said no. So I spent the vast majority of my almost 20 years as a Southern Baptist not knowing any of this.
Mm-hmm.
Boyce at Southern worked to eradicate anti-slavery Northern influence theologically. This is why I call Southern Baptist slaveholder religion.
Yes.
I'm not the only one that does, but it's because they seek to dominate based on hierarchies.
Yeah.
And so he instituted a rigid theological, biblical literalism focused on original sin and the absolutely theologically absurd notion that Jesus had to step between me and a wrathful, vengeful God and save my soul from hell. That is patently absurd. Penal substitution is not the gospel.
That's right.
Southern Baptists vindicated their separation from Northern Baptists on the premise that slaveholding was morally legitimate. Now, where would they get that kind of idea? That's quoted from the article by Dr. Collis Green that I mentioned. Richard Furman was one of the most influential Baptists in the South during the antebellum period. Furman College, Furman University is named after him. It's still a thing. And Richard P. Boyce taught there. And in 1822, this is what Furman had to say about slavery in his defense of slavery. The Christian golden rule of doing to others as we would have they should do to us has been urged as an unanswerable argument against holding slaves. And in my copy of the book, I wrote, yes, it does. No shit. But he goes on, but surely this rule is never to be urged against that order of things which the divine government has established. Nor do our desires become a standard to us under this rule unless they have due regard to justice, propriety, and the general good. My dude, what the actual fuck?
Mm-hmm.
Enslaving people has nothing to do with justice, propriety, or the general good. He then says, and this, I learned today that this was a prevalent notion amongst the enslaving class of Christians in the South, this sort of benevolent enslavement idea.
Yeah.
Slavery, when tempered with humanity and justice, is a state of tolerable happiness, equal, if not superior, to that which many poor enjoys in countries reputed free. Now, Doug Wilson's not a Southern Baptist, but he is a white supremacist neo-Confederate, and his church is the one that Pete Hegseth goes to. He wrote a pamphlet saying something very similar to that. Slavery as it was, it's called. Southern Baptists believed in that stupid-ass curse of Ham nonsense.
Yes.
That God created this hierarchy and sent all the black people to one continent, and that's why they're there. And white people are on the top.
Yeah.
How convenient for people like Richard Furman and Boyce, and later Albert Mohler, who had an iron grip on Southern Theological Seminary for decades, to believe that God put them on top. This is another quote from that article. Slavery, especially Negro slavery, is an institution of heaven, intended for the mutual benefit of master and slave, as proved by the Bible and exemplified in the condition of the society, the prosperity of the Southern states. Folks, there were plenty of rich people in the South, but most of the people were poor.
Yeah.
It was a slaveocracy, an oligarchy, etc.
Yeah.
So I looked up a book today while I was at the library. It was called Southern Baptists and Their History. It was published in 1971. And in the first chapter, it mentioned that Triennial Convention and 1845, the split. It said absolutely nothing about why.
Right.
Nothing. And this was commissioned by the Southern Baptist Historical Commission.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah, but it's also, though, if you notice, like Southern Baptists will not, and they have refused as officially as a Christian denomination. They've refused to say that that racism is a sin, or even that slavery is a sin. But it's because, again, if they do that, they're kind of telling on themselves, right? Like, well, then your whole denomination started from this desire to continue to practice racism and practice slavery. Yeah, so they can't say that, and also because the Bible itself doesn't really come out against it, and they're biblicists, so they're kind of between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah. So she quoted heavily from a report about Southern Seminary, which came out a few years ago. And I talked about that report when I featured Albert Mohler on this particular segment, because Albert Mohler, to me, is a dyed-in-the-wool racist. He can pretend and say, oh, yes, the sin of racism and all that stuff. But if you keep on perpetuating that cycle and not doing anything about it, then you don't have a leg to stand on. And this is what Dr. Collis Green said towards the end of her article. To reckon with and reject white supremacy is to learn its history all the way up to the present, to confront the theologies that enabled and perpetuate it, to face and repent of one's own complicity in perpetuating systems of racial injustice. It can be paralyzing to study histories of injustice, disorienting for white Americans to learn of and acknowledge our own complicity in the legacies of white supremacy. Historians are expert at unearthing the roots of our present condition, but we are on rockier ground in offering remedies. Yet this kind of reckoning demands both that we acknowledge the sins of our past and that we act to address the consequences. Again, I grew up Southern Baptist. I was born in Kansas City, a racially segregated city. I moved to Blue Ridge, Texas, a town where a plumber went all the way around so he didn't have to go through the town square when he went to fix a friend of mine's house because he said, I'm a black person. I'm not driving through Blue Ridge, Texas.
Oh my gosh.
We had one family that had a black child in it. They came in the mid 80s and they got death threats immediately.
Yep.
That's the town I grew up in.
And this stuff is still happening. Yeah, this is still happening. This is in your lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was while I was in junior high school.
Yeah.
Now, I bring all of that history up because they held their convention this week in Dallas, Texas. And while they try to pretend that they're not racist anymore, there are a lot of white Christian nationalists who are Southern Baptist that believe in this whole Christian nationalism nonsense. And they'll try to tell you that race isn't part of it, but then they say things like Black Lives Matter is a Marxist movement.
Yeah.
And then they support things like Reagan's crackdown on welfare queens and all of that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But they've shifted kind of their hierarchical focus a little bit away from race. It's not as overt as it was, but it's still there. To now we're going after Obergefell to try to overturn gay marriage. And one of the things that they said about that was that they believe that God and nature and scripture prove that being homosexual is unnatural and a sin.
Yeah.
Folks, there are over 1,500 different species, including mammals, that exhibit same-sex sexual activity in nature.
Yeah.
And as a permaculture guy, I look for patterns in nature. And if there's that many fucking species that are having some same-sex erotic activity, then that's a pattern in nature, y'all.
It's natural. Yes. It is observably natural. Yes.
It is observably natural.
Yeah.
Now, yes, there are 31,102 verses in the Bible. I looked it up. There are exactly 2 that seem to be about homosexuality.
Right.
And I will say this, that a lot of scholars, even affirming scholars, believe that those 2 verses in Romans actually do have something to do with homosexuality. But here's the thing. Loving same-sex couples is not what Paul was talking about.
No, that's not what's the context. No.
And Paul got shit wrong sometimes.
Yes. Like every human being. Yes, he could be wrong.
Like every human being. And he says, sometimes he said, I'm just giving my opinion. This isn't a command. This is my opinion.
Yes.
I happen to think that a lot of the stuff that he wrote was his opinion.
Yeah.
And he was ardently anti-sex of any kind.
Yes.
He basically told married people, try not to have sex. Only have sex if you're really going crazy because you're just that horny.
Right.
Then you can give yourselves to each other. But otherwise, you should be working for the kingdom because the kingdom is coming and the apocalypse is going to happen in my lifetime.
Yes. Well, yeah, flat out even says he's not pro-marriage or pro-family at all. Jesus isn't either, really. That's the irony, right, of these conservative Christians, like, you're saying, Mike Johnson saying, what I believe is the Bible. Like, well, dude, no, because according to Jesus and according to Paul, don't get married, be celibate like I am. Right. Yeah. So, and then Paul only gives a concession to get married if if you're burning with lust, like, okay, just going to get married.
Yeah.
But
your loins are on fire.
Yes. Yeah.
You can't control yourself.
That'll take care of it. Just get married and that'll solve the problem.
Yeah. They also talked about the marriage is biblical marriage. But what they mean by that is the idea of the American nuclear family, which you will not find in any of the 66 books of the Protestant canon or any of the however many books are in the Catholic and Orthodox canons. You won't find it in there because it's a modern fucking construct.
That's right.
But what you will find in the biblical canon about marriage, levirate marriage, where if you're married and you die, your brother's supposed to marry your widow so that the family line can be continued.
And have sex with her. So to have a
sex with
child
her.
with her. Now, can you imagine? Would anybody put up with that today? Like, oh yeah, my
Oh
brother
my
died, so I'm already married. I got like 4 kids of my own, but yeah, I gotta go. She's gonna come live with us, and I'm gonna go knock her up and have a baby
So
with my. Be like, what is wrong with you? What? Why would you do that? It sounds so insane.
And that's why the story of Tamar is
Yeah.
so important in the Bible, because she used her sexuality to take Judah to task for not living up to that levirate marriage vow.
Right. Yes, he wasn't doing
What's
what he was
also
supposed to do.
in Scripture is that Abraham married his half sister.
Yep.
So when he was still Abram and she was Sarai, they had different moms but the same dad, or different dads and the same mom. I can't remember which one it was, but they were half sister. And he mentions that twice.
Yeah.
It's mentioned twice.
Well, that was his excuse. That's the reason why he gave her away to other men, right? When he would get in trouble with these, he'd go into these other countries, and the ruler of another country he'd get in trouble with them, and then the ruler would be like, "Hey, she's kind of cute. Is that your wife? Oh no, she's just my sister.
Just my sister."
And he handed her off. Like,
yeah.
Dude, this is
do what you will with her.
This is the patriarch of the faith. Like, damn, man.
So
that's a little over the top.
We got levirate marriage. We got incestual marriage. That's in the Bible. We got Solomon having 300 wives and 700 concubines. Woo, that's a polyamorous dream right there.
He was probably really tired.
He could get super tired eventually. Right? So, and I mentioned this last night on John's show. I asked a rabbi one time or multiple rabbis, about whether or not David and Jonathan's relationship was a sexual one.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the rabbis said, yes, David was probably what we would call bisexual today, but David and Jonathan were likely married, because in the story, there's a gift, a vow, and a blessing. And this particular rabbi, his name was Mike Harvey, said, that would have been seen as a marriage ceremony. Israelites who read that would have recognized that as a wedding.
Yep.
It also talks about how they gave their souls to each other, that your love to me was more than that of a woman.
Yes.
They went out away from other people to hide, to kiss each other.
Yes.
And I don't think it was just the kiss of greeting, because you don't need to hide from people to do that.
No, because everybody.
Right. It sounded like they were out in the freaking wilds making out.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
So
exactly right.
Does every biblical scholar believe that, and every rabbi? No. But the text certainly supports that reading.
Yes.
And another rabbi agreed with that particular rabbi when I was positing that question on Twitter. So
interesting.
Biblical marriage looks a lot different than the focus on the family nonsense.
Yeah.
That these Southern Baptists are pushing.
Yeah, that's right. I'll give a plug to my friend Dr. Jennifer Bird has done excellent work in this, and she has a book called Biblical Marriage. What do the scriptures say? So I recommend anybody interested in that. She's incredible. When I debated Dr. quote unquote Dr. James White on this question of what is biblical marriage, she was excellent. I mean, she helped me so much, kind of preparing me and gave me excellent, things. A lot of the stuff you just said, but like she pointed out, like, biblical marriage in the Bible has always been, it's always a contract between two men.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about love. It's not about romance ever. In fact, in the whole Bible, you never have any ecstatic, romantic expressions of love between a husband and a wife. Yes, you got some of it in Song of Solomon, but they're not married.
They're not married. They're just horny.
Yeah. You never get those kind of expressions of love and devotion, right? This kind of deep soul love, this sort of like you complete me kind of language. You never get it between, a husband and a wife. You only see it twice, and it's between two same-sex people. The one is you just mentioned, it's David and Jonathan, and the other one is in the book of Ruth. right?
Yeah.
Where I will go, your God will be my God, your people will be my people. Where you go, I will go. To the point where straight white Christians, when they get married in America today, will quote that scripture from Ruth, right?
Right.
To one another as heterosexual couples, but they don't even realize what they're doing is they're quoting same, not that I think they had a relationship or anything, but that kind of, it was more like friendship, right? The kind of deep love that people express in the Old Testament is not between married couples. It's between, men or women who have an intense either friendship, or maybe it's more than that, like with David and Jonathan. But I mean, that's telling, right? Because these marriages were not, they didn't enter into marriage because I'm in love with you. It's more like, hey, the man has to, this is how he gains prominence and wealth.
Right.
He needs children, he needs flocks, he needs, property and all this stuff. And it's sort of more of a business arrangement than anything.
Yeah. So that's the Southern Baptists are pushing this. We've got to overturn Obergefell. Now, Obergefell is the one that allowed for gay marriage in all 50 states. I would not be surprised to see them come for what was it, Loving versus West Virginia or Virginia, the one that allowed interracial marriage.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, the Southern Baptists are coming for things like they did for abortion. And here's the ironic thing. On their website, it says, on the Southern Baptist website that I looked at today in the year of our Lord 2025, Baptists cherish and defend religious liberty and deny the right of any secular or religious authority to impose a confession of faith upon a church body or body of churches. If you're trying to force everybody to live according to your Baptist faith and message, you do not cherish religious liberty.
No.
You do not. You're
Right.
like that jackass Mary Miller who called a Sikh a Muslim and said it was satanic to have him praying in the halls of Congress.
Right. Yes, exactly. Because you don't know the difference between a Sikh and a Muslim. Not that it would matter either way. Even if you correctly identified him as a Sikh, it's not a shame. It's not an abomination. It's
She
what you do.
probably never heard of what Sikhs are.
Wood couldn't tell you what a Sikh is. And yes, it's
Yeah.
a brown-skinned guy with a turban on his head. He must be a Muslim.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what they were doing at this year's convention. They also put forward this idea that they want the government to promote families having babies, legislation for pregnancies, which ties right into white supremacists' great replacement theory, if you ask me.
Yes.
Because the Southern Baptist Convention remains overwhelmingly white.
Yes.
There are some churches that are Southern Baptists that are, predominantly people of color, but it is predominantly white.
Yes.
They're doing all of this while continuing to sweep sexual abuse from their clergy and seminary professors and people in positions of power under the rug. And recently, a woman named Jennifer Lyle died just earlier this week. And she was a whistleblower who was sexually assaulted and abused by a seminary professor, and she came forward and brought it to light. Yeah. She worked for Lifeway, which, if you're in the Southern Baptist world, you know exactly what that is. Lifeway Christian bookstores. I spent a lot of time in them places.
I worked for one. That's how I got through college. I worked for one in the music department. Yeah.
And she was so vilified by people in power.
Yeah.
Even after she died, that white supremacist Megan Basham was disparaging her name on social media.
Yeah.
While trying to say, "Oh, it's a sad loss and everything," but she had massive strokes. She told Kristen Dumais, she didn't think she could survive what was being done to her much longer recently.
Yeah. 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 It's very sad to hear that story. And, but it's sadly very typical, right? This kind of thing. The women, I think I think it was Kristen Dumais who said, speaking about this woman, Lyle, and her situation, like she's a textbook case of like what you think about when people say, why don't women speak out when they're sexually
Right.
abused?
Yeah.
Because of the way she was treated. It was just so disgusting, so shameful the way she was treated. And I'm sure that the stress from this contributed to the strokes that ended up killing her. Because she lost everything. She was an executive at Lifeway, their publishing house. She was high up. She had a lot to lose, and she did lose it, right? Because she spoke out.
Yeah. And there have been hundreds of cases of sexual abuse by Southern Baptist preachers, deacons, etc. People high up in whether it's at the church level or in the Southern Baptist Convention, in the seminary, etc. And they swept a lot of it under the rug. And now this hate group, that's right. The Southern Baptist Convention is a hate group. They are a religious extremist hate group with origins in racism and gender and racial hierarchy. And now they're coming after the LGBTQ plus community. And I know exactly the kind of shit that they say, because in 1992, when I was at New Wanu Baptist Church in Honolulu, a Southern Baptist church, our church had a series on the gay agenda. And because I was young and stupid and had no critical thinking skills, and I was a good Southern Baptist, I bought it all hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
And I have had to repent for that.
Yeah.
Just like I had to repent for racism that was inside me that I didn't know was there. And that's why you'll find essays in my book about anti-racism and anti-LGBTQ plus bigotry and how they're both wrong.
Yeah.
Because I am repenting, and I am now an ally and an anti-racist activist, etc. Because I know from where I came, and I know that is a sinful place to be.
Yeah.
But the Southern Baptists are mired in it.
Yeah, I just want to just say real quick, like that's beautiful, because like what you're expressing is like you were capable of acknowledging your own sin, your own failure. What Jesus talks about in the Sermon on the Mount, metanoia, to change your way of thinking, to change your behavior.
Exactly.
Not just to say, "Oh, I failed, I sinned, woe is me, please forgive me." It's to go as far as to say my entire way of thinking is going to change. My entire way of living is going to change. And this is supposed to be one of the foundational elements of Christianity. And so when you see evangelical Christians, conservative Christians, incapable of repentance, they are incapable. Like, when was the last time any of them said, oops, we were wrong, we're sorry, we're going to change that, we're going to fix that, the best example is like what you've already mentioned, this expose that came out was a Houston newspaper that did this massive reporting, uncovered decades of sexual abuse in the Southern Baptist Church, and they have really pretty much done nothing, but are now at the same time saying like, oh, it's taken care of. But we know it isn't. We know, because they're self-policing this thing, right? All they're doing is burying things, shuffling people around, and they want to look good. They don't want to actually deal with this issue. And so it's not just the blatant racism, which was the genesis of this whole movement. It's also the covering up sexual assault and the racism, the nationalism. I agree with you. I'm very happily no longer a Southern Baptist.
Yeah. I mean, theologically, their penal substitution Calvinistic nonsense is terrible anyway.
Yeah.
And Paul Presser was one of the people implicated in that Houston Chronicle expose, and he was definitely a racist. He fought to keep the Confederate flag in churches or some shit like that.
Oh my gosh!
And he was one of the people who was grooming and assaulting young men.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, for all of these reasons, the Southern Baptist Convention is this week's representative of fundamentalist fuckwittery. And if we're going to ban stuff, I think we should ban the Southern Baptist Convention from any and all political office. Anybody, if you identify as Southern Baptist, you don't get to be in office anymore because you don't care about the Constitution and your roots are racism and you cannot swim in that cesspool
Right.
for that long and not come out covered in shit. And you refuse to take a bath.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I would say at bare minimum, they are the largest evangelical Protestant, Christian denomination in America. But gladly, good news, they're still shrinking because they're all kind of shrinking. But I think at bare minimum, they should lose their tax exempt status. You know what I mean? Because I've always felt this way. Like there should be a litmus test for any nonprofit organization. It doesn't even have to be Christian, right? If you as a nonprofit, especially as a Christian organization in the community, if you cannot demonstrate that a significant percentage of the money that you receive is going for the good of the people in your community, after school clubs, helping kids with homework, helping them get jobs, hosting AA meetings, there should be a bare minimum of things where if at least 50%, 40%, I mean, I think that's being generous. I mean, I would personally say, I wish it was even more than that, but I would say a significant percentage of your annual income, if it's not going to actually help people in the community, you're not a church. You don't deserve a nonprofit status, and you should pay your taxes like everybody else. Because again, the Christian church is supposed to be an organization that exists for the good of others. What my experience growing up as Southern Baptist and in a lot of churches is that those churches exist for themselves, right? You collect your special offerings so you can build a bigger gymnasium and you can have a bowling alley or a skating rink for your youth group or whatever, buy flat screen plasma TVs for the sanctuary and that kind of thing. Now, there are some good ones, and those absolutely. There's lots of churches out there, especially in the inner cities, that are doing incredible work. They're feeding the poor and they're caring for sheltering the homeless in their community. They're providing help for lower income, kids, giving them a place to go, giving them activities after school, helping them with their homework, helping them get into college, helping them to get jobs. And that's wonderful. And if churches are going to do that, those are the things that Jesus actually commanded them to do, by the way. Then yeah, sure. Give them a tax exempt status because they're giving them that status, that tax exemption to help them do more of the good in the community that we all want to be done. But if they're refusing to do it, and by the way, that's usually what they'll say when you try to say, they'll complain about it and say, oh, you're stealing, you're robbing from me to take my tax money and care for these homeless people, take my tax money and provide food for these poor kids, like the church should be the one to do that. Yeah, but you're not. In fact, if you were doing it, we wouldn't have to take your tax money to do it because the church will be already taking care of it. But they are not. And the fact that they're not is the reason why we do need to find some way to care for our own people. And that empathy, that compassion should be something that someone who's actually following Jesus should understand completely. Of course, we care about other human beings. We care about children. We don't want them to be hungry. We don't want them to starve. And when those kids do well, again, the rising tides lift all boats. We're all better off. Our communities are better off if there's less people that are hungry or have no place to sleep or don't have an education, etc. It lowers crime rates, all kinds of things, all the things we want to see, right? If you don't like seeing people living on the streets, this is how you do something about it. So, yeah, very sad.
And politically, where they stand, because Mike Johnson praises the free market and wants to take healthcare away from people and SNAP benefits away from people and all of these other kinds of things. And that is, broadly speaking, how Southern Baptist church members who typically vote Republican see things. And if they were doing what Jesus said in Matthew 25, 31 through 46, there wouldn't be homeless people in America.
Yep. That's
There-
exactly right.
And all of that kind of thing.
Yes.
So, folks, that's our show tonight. I just got word that Israel has attacked Iran,
Yeah, I
and
heard that.
I pray for peace throughout the Middle East, and that's a horrifying prospect. And I just don't even know what to do with that. But tune in next week. We will have Dr. Dan McClellan on the show next week, the author
Wow.
of The Bible Said So. He is a TikTok superstar, a biblical scholar, and now best-selling author. So tune in next week, same bat time, same bat channel, here at 8 o'clock on GodSquadPod.com. Thank you so much, Keith Giles, for joining me tonight while December was at her conference in Arizona.
Yeah.
And before I let you go, though, Keith, where can we find you, follow you, and tell us just real quick about the collective?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So, well, you can follow me, KeithJones.com. My books are on Amazon, blah, blah, blah. I'm on Heretic Happy Hour podcast like 3 times a week with Matthew DiStefano. Yeah, I want to talk about the collective. So there's something called the collective. It's spelled QUOLLECTIVE. So thecollective.com. Go and check it out. It's something that Choir Publishing, I'm co-owner of. Choir Publishing has put together. We have a lot of great contributors, including Dylan and December and some others that are on there. Matthew's there, I'm there, many others contributing. Jeremy Steele, Dan Henderson, Herb Montgomery, many great people. And basically, this is a website we put together because, we see it's very concerning to see, ABC News bending over this week, firing someone because they dared to just speak the truth. How dare you insult Stephen Miller? And it's very disturbing to see the freedom of the press being threatened, and journalism in general just being threatened. And so we just gathered a bunch of people together that we believe in, that we know have smart and intelligent and important things to say about what's going on in our world, sometimes through a lens of theology, sometimes not. And so to amplify those voices and to provide a platform for that to happen, we started the collective. So go check it out, QUOLLECTIVE, collective.com. And we're also offering a 1 month free. So when you sign up, you just put in, there'll be a place to put a code, the number 1, and then month free, 1 month free, no spaces. You get the first month free. Go check it out. There's some incredible articles already up there now. It's great quantity and quality, and we're very proud of that. There's a lot of free resources there as well to check out. So yeah, go over there and check it out. I want to also give a plug too, real quick. A book that's coming out next week from Choir Publishing. It's called The Unchristian Truth About White Christian Nationalism. Has a foreword by Lisa Sharon Harper, also including chapters from Dylan Neighbor Cruz, December Rose, and Brandon Robertson, many other people. We invited people who are people of color, people who are trans, people who are gay, people who are bisexual, as well as allies, people who are straight, but are allies of these groups of people, to talk about the dangers of white Christian nationalism. It couldn't have come out. It couldn't have been released. We didn't obviously know that America was going to look the way it does this week, the way it does. So I think the timing is perfect. So if you want to read some things, like, again, that dose of sanity you get here from the God Squad, this book is a great place to start. Go and check that out. It'll be available on Amazon starting Tuesday of next week. So that'll be June 24th. Go check that out.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Keith. Y'all check out the collective. Check out the Unchristian Truth About Christian Nationalism. And hey, don't be afraid to check out Theological Musings Volume 1 and 2 either.
That's right. Great books.
that I wrote. But we'll be back next week. December, we'll be back. Dr. Dan McClellan will be here. Thank y'all so much for your support. Like, subscribe, and share. We appreciate you. And remember, peaceful mass non-compliance.
That's right. Be safe out there on those protests. Thanks, everybody.
Peace.